Thank you so much for listening to this live recorded teaching of our Sunday gatherings at Proclamation Church. Our hope is that this teaching reminds you of the love that Jesus has for you. Listen, if you're in the area, we invite you to join us in person at one of our Sunday gatherings at 9 or 10:45 a.m. Our desire is for you to come and be a part of what God is doing here. To find a little bit more about Proclamation Church or to support the mission and vision of our church, you could always visit us at proclamationtn.com. We'll see you soon.
All right. As we jump into it, I'm going to acknowledge a few things right off the bat. There's a few elephants in the room. Number one, it's spring break. Some of you guys are here. A lot of you are not. If you listen to this sermon later on, there's quite a few. I think it was some point on Instagram this week. I was like, wow, I saw everybody traveling and like, oh, I'm in Japan. I was like, wow, will there be anybody at church this weekend? I have no idea. I'm thankful that you're here, but it's spring break. We've got a lot of people who are out, a lot of people traveling too. The weather is dreary outside. It's not nice weather like we had yesterday. So that's number one. Number two, who else you will not see here today? Derek and Benji decided it was spring break, so they were both just going to take off. They're gone. Benji and his entire family are in Uganda. Derek, I don't know where Derek's at. He's somewhere, probably at a beach. That would be my guess if I had to try and guess something. He's not. Linda Dice is telling me I'm wrong. So he's somewhere, but he's not here. I'll tell you that. So what happened was he just decided that he was going to make sure that it's spring break and he was going to take a trip and he was going to find somebody else to preach this Sunday. So that's number two. Two of our 4 elders, or 5 elders, are out today traveling. Number 3, our other elder is out sick today. I was not supposed to preach today. Doug Porter was supposed to be preaching this week, and he texted us, he texted on Monday, said, hey, I'm not feeling very good. By Thursday, he was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I've got the flu. He's like, but I think he was like, don't worry, I can go. And we're like, no, you should stay away from everybody right now. He's still running a fever, so it's not good. So I'm glad he's not here. I hope he's locked away in a room somewhere. So here's what that means. That means that I found out Thursday night that I was preaching this weekend. What else is happening? My wife is out of town. She had to go to a wedding, and she left Thursday afternoon, which means I had both girls at home on spring break with Dad by myself. So I have had a chance to work on this at night while they're asleep. Okay? So, normally, you know me, you know my sermons. I honestly believe that this was Derek's opportunity to try to get my sermon under 45 minutes. We'll prove him wrong. This is not going to happen today, not on my watch. No, we'll be good. Okay, so all those things. And then on top of that, if you've been around the building for a little bit, you might see that we started doing some work. We're trying to do a few things to get ready for Easter coming up. The building needs a facelift. Every now and then, every year, we had this big push right before Easter to do a few things. And what happened was none of my baseboards showed up. It was all delayed. So if you look out in the hallway out here, you'll see that the hallway just looks like a bunch of baseboards were ripped off and we didn't put anything else up there. Baseboards will be there before Easter. I promise you. Please Home Depot come through. That's what we're waiting on right now. Anyways, I acknowledge all those things. Here's why I acknowledge that. I want to point this thing out. Because things like this will happen periodically that can really, really distract you from the moment of faith.
Yeah.
Okay? There's a moment that we have, regardless of any of the things that have happened this week, regardless of how much time or how little time that I've had to prep, regardless of people being sick or not being here, but what the walls look like. The Lord's movement in this space is not dependent on anything else.
Come on.
There's something that the Lord wants to do in you. There's something that He wants to teach us in this text today. And it has absolutely nothing to do with anything I just mentioned. Don't let those things distract you.
Good.
The Lord wants to meet you here. And Satan will use whatever he can to distract you from that moment. Okay? So, again, we're going to jump into the text today. Thankfully, the text is very straightforward. It's super passionate. It's very straightforward as far as like what the call is on the life of the believer. But I do hope that if you've read this passage before, if you've heard it preached before, I hope again that today we'll get to see it with some fresh eyes. Okay? So we're going to jump into it. Hannah and I, we have 2 daughters, and one of them's in here with me today, Cora. And we began this thing this past summer. We do family movie nights on Friday nights where we get a pizza and we watch a movie. And so this past summer we decided we wanted to start introducing our kids to some of the movies that we loved to watch when we were kids, right? Two things I realized. One, whoever was making these movies when we were kids were trying to traumatize us. I don't think you realize it, but like you start digging into everything and it's like, why does every movie have somebody dying in all of these movies? I remember watching Homeward Bound and my daughter just weeping, right? As he's just got the golden retrievers coming over the mountain and he's just there, you're waiting. It's just like it's that moment. We watched Air Bud. The clown shows up and takes the dog back. Again, especially if it's an animal, Cora is not going to do well. We've learned this really well. So those good movies, also like Little Giants, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, like all these great movies, right? We've just been getting into those things. And it's super fun to get a chance to introduce those to your kids and to watch your kids get super passionate about those movies. Cora got really into Little Giants after we watched that. And we watched it like every day for a couple of days. And it was super great because the icebox was awesome. So we had these great movies. Now, one of the things that we've not gotten into, one of our older TV shows, right? So if you, I don't know when you grew up or stuff like that, but I grew up with TV shows like Doug on Nickelodeon, Legends of the Hidden Temple, Nickelodeon, Space Ghost, before Space Ghost got weird on Cartoon Network. Like all these, there are all these like cartoons. You used to come home and watch these cartoons while doing homework and stuff like that. So one of the other shows that we haven't introduced Cora to yet is Mr. Rogers. I don't know if you guys know the TV show Mr. Rogers. Hopefully you do. If you haven't, you have some healing to do and you just don't know it yet. Okay? He's here for you. He would come out, he would go to his closet, and take his like, all this stuff off, start putting his sweater on. And he had this song that he would sing, and he would welcome you to this neighborhood, right? And he talks about, if you've ever seen this interview where Mr. Rogers talks about why he had this show, it was because he talks about being a kid and he would watch the news, watch the TV, and he would get really worried and afraid and scared of all the things that he would see happening on the TV. And one day he was talking to his mom about all these things that were like, that's basically making him afraid. And the thing that she told him, the thing that stuck with him was, in those moments when you're afraid and you see all that's happening around you, look for the helpers. Look for those who are like moving to the trouble. And find them, because they're always there, right? It was that mentality that really kind of stayed with him his entire life. So instead of creating a TV show that just entertained children, Mr. Rogers, he created a show that noticed children who felt overlooked. This was his thing. He wanted to make sure where kids who were afraid and lonely, where they were confused or unsure if they mattered. Every episode was built around the message that they were seen and that they were valued. In a world full of noise and spectacle, Mr. Rogers chose to slow down and see people. And that's exactly what we see in this passage. The text says that when Jesus looked at the crowds, he didn't just see a mass of people, he saw individuals. These individuals who are harassed or helpless, distressed, like sheep without a shepherd. And the scriptures say he has compassion on you. And that word in the original language, it describes something deep, like a feeling that just comes from your gut. Jesus wasn't indifferent to the crowds that he saw around him. He was moved by them. And he said something surprising. He said, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. In other words, there are so many people who need hope, who need guidance, and the good news of the kingdom. The problem is not the harvest. The problem is that there aren't enough people who are willing to see what Jesus sees and to step in to help. Just like Mr. Rogers told children to look for the helpers, Jesus now calls his followers to be those helpers in a field of harvest. We're going to walk through this text today, guys. It is very straightforward. It's super, like I said, it's very, very simple. There's not like a whole bunch of complex language here. I did, with very little hours I got into, there's only a few things to note, even in the Greek, but not much. But we want to walk through this text. And at the very end, what I want to give you are just three needs that we have, not the community around us, three needs that we have that come from this text, okay? You good? Let's go. Okay, somebody say yes? Yeah. Okay, there we go. All right, there we go. All right, Matthew chapter 9, verse 35. Let's jump straight into it. It says, Jesus continued going around to all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and every sickness. Matthew is actually closing out a major section of his gospel right here. If you go back and you look at Matthew chapter 4, verse 23, it says this. It says, "Now Jesus began to go all over Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness among the people." So what we're seeing is this culmination, this particular point where Matthew's kind of tying this back into what he said started in chapter 4:23. When Jesus began his ministry, he was going around teaching and healing. And now here we are in chapter 9, and what do we see? That Jesus is continuing to teach and heal the people around him. Essentially, everything that has happened since chapter 4 has been a summarization of Jesus' ministry to Galilee. And now here we are in chapter 9, and Matthew closes out this major section by walking through this ministry that Jesus has walked through. At this point in his life, Jesus has become this itinerant preacher, which means he just travels from town to town, all over the place, preaching the gospel and healing people. His ministry in Galilee was about 18 months. He spent 18 months traveling what scholars estimate was somewhere around 240 towns and villages, okay, all over Galilee. Matthew uses a couple things to let us know that this ministry was not just a pick and choose kind of, I see you, I see you, I see you, but was trying to be exhaustive in that one, he says that he went to all the towns and the villages. That may not mean a very literal, he went to every single village and town that was there, but Matthew is definitely giving a point that he went to as many were possible that he could get to, okay? If it was not all of them, it was almost all of them, okay? It's exhaustive. He went to all of them, okay? And then the fact that he uses both towns and villages, again, shows that this was this exhaustive point of him going. He was going to anybody and everybody. He continued going. If your version doesn't use that word continued, like the CSB does, that actually comes from the tense of the word going that is used. The verb here at this point is an imperfect, which means it points to this continual process over and over and over again. So in Matthew uses the word all, just lets us know that this was not just a few cities that he returned to over and over again, but it was a concerted effort to be as comprehensive in scope as possible. Okay? All over Galilee. And what was he doing? He was preaching the good news of the kingdom and healing every disease and every sickness. His ministry is twofold. He both teaches and heals. Healthy proclamation of the gospel involves both aspects of word and deed. This is to us today. We cannot be all about one to the exclusion of the other. A church that preaches the gospel but is not active in engaging its community in service has lost its mission. But a church that engages in a community without the proclamation of the gospel has lost its vision. Why are we here? The gospel is what compels us forward. So if we look back at chapter 9, the rest of chapter 9 kind of preceding this passage, we get just a small glimpse of what this ministry was like in his deed. Okay? A daughter who has died, a woman who has a bleeding issue, 2 blind men and a demon-possessed man. We literally just have a running text from chapter 9 of all of the diseases and all of the sicknesses and all of the people that he meets and he heals. And as verse 35 closes, we're now going to see a major shift in tone. Matthew's getting ready to get to a major shift. Chapter 10 is this giant shift in ministry for Jesus. So as we get to the end, we see Matthew chapter 9, verse 36. It says, when he saw the crowds, he felt compassion for them because they were distressed and dejected like sheep without a shepherd. 2 things we see in this passage are Jesus' emotions towards the crowd, fueled by what he sees in the crowd. He has spent all of his time ministering to all of these people in these towns. Everyone who is sick and afflicted, people who are hurting. He has been healing their diseases and their sicknesses, but we're about to see a change in this strategy. Jesus this entire time has been bringing his disciples along with him by taking them with him throughout Galilee as he teaches and he heals. And now that he's been watching, they've been traveling with him, watching him doing ministry, now what he does for a moment is says, take your eyes off of me and look around you. Focus for a moment on them. He changes their focus. He essentially says, you've been watching me and traveling with me, and what you have learned is how I move towards those who are lost, those who are in need. And now he lifts their eyes for a moment onto those around him, and he points to the need all around him. We begin to see this foreshadowing, this coming later in the book of Acts, that Christ is already aware that he is going to suffer and die and ascend towards the Father. And what he needs now is the disciples to see the need that is before them and be compelled to meet the need. But they need vision. They need to see. As he sees, Jesus does not begin with strategy. He began with compassion. Before there is a mission, there is a vision. And we must see people the way Christ sees them. Something about compassion that's interesting is that compassion can only be achieved when I take my eyes off of myself. When I begin to look at others who are around me, to see their plights and their struggles, to see their hurts and their sufferings, and to be moved towards them. Biblical compassion is not finished when it sees those around me, but compassion must also compel me towards them. It is not enough to just see, but we must be moved. This word translated compassion in this passage comes from this Greek term, splanchnon. It's a weird term, guys. But it refers to this viscera, like the intestines. And it means a deep, deep hurt. You know, have you ever experienced something that just, when you experience, or when a news that was told, that your stomach, the pit of you just dropped out within you? That's this feeling here. That he sees, and he sees his hurt, and his guts literally hurt with pain because of compassion that he has for these people. When we are willing to feel the pain of lost people and to understand the depth of their sin and this gaping chasm that stands between them and the Father, then we are close at that moment to experiencing the compassion of Jesus. Close. Proximity leads to empathy. When I'm around people, I begin to empathize with them. I hear the stories, I see their wounds, I weep with them, I rejoice with them. I grow in compassion for them. What else is interesting here is the way Matthew describes the crowd's distress when they're in their distress and dejection. He says Christ sees them and he sees sheep without a shepherd. The crowd's need is not simply, well, we might look at the crowd around us and think, oh, well, what they need is this or what they need is this. He sees sheep without a shepherd. Listen to this. He spent all this time healing diseases and sicknesses, and he doesn't say that they're patients without a doctor. If the biggest issue facing the crowd was their sickness, that analogy would make sense.
Yeah.
Their biggest need wasn't financial. He doesn't say they're workers without jobs. We can look at the problems all around us in the community, and we oftentimes tend to think, oh, what they need is better access to health care. Good things. What they need is better paying job. Good things. Jesus looks and sees sheep without a shepherd. Guys, can I tell you for a moment what sheep without a shepherd are? They're prey. A sheep has no natural defense mechanism. They might run and try and headbutt, but to a predator, that makes no. It literally just, you made them chase easier. They're naturally prey animals. If they don't have a shepherd, they have nothing to defend them. Sheep without a shepherd are vulnerable to anything that wants to prey on them. I don't think we oftentimes recognize that as being the thing around us. When I look to people when I look at my community and I see the hurts and I see the things that are going on in lives, I don't often think, oh, they're sheep without a shepherd, and that there's something preying on them. Later on, we find out in Peter where he says, the devil roams around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he will devour. There is someone who is trying to prey on them. And without a shepherd, they are prey. That's what Jesus sees when he looks out and he sees them. Christ is compelled to all those around them because of his compassion for them. And he wants his disciples as well to have compassion on the crowds. So as Jesus sees and has compassion on those around him, he turns to his disciples and he tells them, Matthew chapter 9, verse 37, the harvest is abundant, but the workers are few. His metaphor now changes from sheep to a harvest. As he looks out, he sees a field full of ripe crops ready for the harvest. Again, it's important to note Jesus' metaphor. He is not saying that he needs field workers who are going to go out and water the plants. Field workers who are going to go out there and remove the weeds. As Jesus looks out, what he sees is crops that are ready for the harvest. He needs people who are willing to go into the harvest and reap it. That's what he's looking for. The point that Jesus is making is that the harvest is ready now. Right now. Jesus has done the work. He's been traveling. He's been healing sicknesses. He's been healing diseases. The people are ready to follow him. But he has a limited ability to encounter everyone. So now he commissions his disciples to reach the rest. The harvest is plentiful, but what is needed are workers. Don't look past this. To be a disciple of Jesus is to be at work in the harvest. We cannot be a true disciple of Jesus, growing in our discipleship, if we refuse to join him on mission. If the harvest was abundant then, and the laborers were few, how much greater is the need now? As the earth population with over 7 billion people. Guys, the struggle that we're experiencing today in the church as a whole are people who are followers of Jesus but are not interested in being a harvester for Jesus. If Jesus can say that this is happening in Galilee, the same can be said about Nashville and Proclamation Church. The harvest in Nashville is abundant, but what we need are workers. On its most basic level, Jesus is telling us that the greatest need facing the harvest today has little to do with gospel understanding. Has little to do with what sin people have in their lives, little to do with what their worldview is. The greatest need facing the harvest today is that we need people who are willing to go into the harvest. You may not know it yet if you haven't been there, but in Raleigh, back where I'm from, before we moved here, there is, and I'm sure the same thing here in Nashville, right? But in Raleigh, if you get outside of Raleigh and start driving around, you will see all kinds of crops. You don't think farmland in Raleigh, North Carolina, but right outside of it, there's a lot of soybean, a lot of strawberries, a lot of corn, kind of all over the city. You get out there and you just go and you can walk around and you see all these things, right? What's wild is if you take that imagery, what I want you to see is what Jesus is describing is that when you're driving down by this field and you look out and you say you're at a field of strawberries, what you see are these just red strawberries that are ready to be picked. The harvest is ready now. But here's the question. What happens if no one goes into the field and picks the strawberries? They dry up on the vine. The answer is nobody, they never get picked. They never get that point where they're supposed to become food for someone. Here it is. Jesus is sending us out. The harvest is there. What we need are the workers. Jesus' reminder to us is that there are people in our community, in our city right now that are ready to receive the gospel, and the only thing that prevents them from following Christ is no one's asking. So facing the shortage of workers in the field, Jesus then calls his disciples to action. This is Matthew chapter 9, verse 38. He says, "Therefore, pray to the Lord of the harvest to send out workers into the harvest." before Christ sends out the disciples, he calls them to pray. The work is much and the laborers are few. And as you are going to the towns, which is going to happen in chapter 10, he sends them out to these towns. As you are going, I'm about to send you, be praying for the Lord to raise up more workers. The focus of their prayer is for more laborers to join the work. And I want to say something that I think it could come across kind of harsh, a little difficult, but when I say it, I want you to hear like all the love and affection that I can possibly give to you, okay? The church right now, the church needs less people today who sit around and talk about living on mission and more people who actually engage in mission.
Amen.
We're really, really good at talking about things, but we're not super great at actually living life on mission. The very first step to engaging in the mission of God is prayer. Prayer. The text flows just like this. Compassion to those around me who do not know Christ leads me to see the need around me for more laborers, and seeing that need should drive me in prayer. Listen to me. Prayer is the evidence of your compassion. So if we come in here today, and we believe that we are compassionate people, but we haven't been driven to prayer, you're not compassionate the way Jesus was compassionate. The evidence of our compassion is our prayer life. And the willing to seek those. We need a realization that others' greatest needs are outside of my capacity to meet, and only then will our compassion drive us to pray for more laborers. There's this story of this bedridden woman in London, England, who had been able to cultivate this life of prayer. She was a huge prayer warrior. She had read in the papers about this evangelist, this guy named D.L. Moody, who was a pastor in Chicago. And she didn't know who Moody was or anyone who was associated with him. But reading these papers, these articles, she decided that she wanted to pray for him. So she began to place that newspaper under her pillow, and she would begin to pray that the Lord would bring D.L. Moody to London to preach. Eventually, Moody does go to London in 1872 when his church building had caught fire and burned down in Chicago. So he ends up in London itinerant preaching. So he gets there, and while he's speaking at a time to the YMCA, there's this pastor who approaches him. The pastor comes up and invites him to preach at his church. So Moody goes and preaches at the pastor's church on Sunday morning, and absolutely nothing happens. After the service, the sister of this disabled woman, the woman who was bedridden, she comes and she talks to her, and she says that a Mr. Moody of Chicago had come that morning and preached, and that he was going to speak again that evening. The woman told her sister, if I had only known, I would have eaten no breakfast, and I would have spent all the time in prayer. So she says, send me no dinner, leave me alone, and lock the door. I am going to spend the whole afternoon and evening in prayer. That evening, the building was packed to hear Moody, and the atmosphere was different, and the power of God fell in that place, and 500 people gave their lives to Christ. Prayer is what we need. She was compassionate. She saw the need, she knew the need, and she prayed. And then she prayed some more. The building was packed, and 500 people gave their lives. Our compassion is evident in our ability to pray for others. Charles Spurgeon would say it this way: a burning heart will soon find itself a flaming tongue. Unwillingness to speak about or talk about the gospel, and willingness to pray for those around me that they would receive the gospel, says a lot more about the condition of my heart. Another evangelical preacher of the late 19th century, his name is S.D. Gordon, he said, you can do more than pray after you have prayed, but you cannot do more than pray until you have prayed. Prayer shows our dependence on the Lord. It recognizes that He is the Lord of the harvest and we are not. It recognizes that He is the one who has been working behind the scenes to prepare a ripe harvest. He's the one who can change hearts. In this same analogy, it is those who were once right to receive the gospel who have been saved, who have now been commissioned to go back into the fields from where they came to keep harvesting. receive the gospel. I know that many of us would prefer that the text just stops right here. That pray to the Lord to send out harvests. That's where we want it to stop. Pray to the Lord to send out harvests. We can take that and believe, okay, my response then is to the need in my city is to pray people all around me. Pray that the Lord would send somebody to my neighborhood. Lord, I pray you would send a believer to my neighborhood to see the people in my neighborhood come to faith. Lord, I pray you would send somebody to my workspace who could share the gospel with people here, who would see them come to faith. Newsflash, he did.
Yeah.
It's you. It's us. Guys, the idea here is that every home in Nashville, every home of a person at Proclamation Church becomes this hub of gospel influence to everybody around them. And as more people are saved and more people come to know Christ, then their hubs, their homes become more hubs of gospel influence to the community around them. The harvest field isn't somewhere far away, guys. It's everywhere God has placed you. We're not going to get into chapter 10 today, but the very next verse is Jesus preparing and sending out the disciples, the ones that he just told to pray. Praying for the harvest is not the same as laboring in the harvest, and the call here is that we do both. Okay? So here's coming out of this text today. When I read this text this weekend, I think I walked away with like, all right, here are three needs that you and I have as we come out of this text. Okay? Number one, we need compassionate eyes. We need eyes to see those around me. It was Jesus' compassion that led him to call the disciples to prayer. I said earlier how compassion is others focused. It's always focused outside of myself. I begin to have compassion when I'm in proximity to people who are hurting and distressed. And hurting and distress doesn't always look the way that you think it might. Just because someone in their outward appearance has everything together and that they're not in need doesn't mean that they're not hurting. In fact, some of those very same people have everything they could possibly desire and still don't feel whole. And they aren't sure why. Because they are sheep without a shepherd. And they have bought the lie. They were preyed upon. And they believed that money or job or whatever it may be, status, would give them everything they wanted. They were preyed upon. The biggest obstacle to us having compassionate eyes today is that most of us don't have the space in our lives to actually see other people. We spend so much of our time focusing on my needs, my family's needs, all the tasks and worries that just come with being a human today. We spend all of our time looking at ourselves, so much so that we can no longer see the need around me. Guys, that's the hard part. I think it would be foolish of me to sit here and tell you that here's what I know is happening for all of us. Nobody who walks into church and then walks out who wants to go live on mission, nobody says they go home and they're like, you know what, I'm just not going to do that. In actual reality, what happens is most of us, our plates are so full with a bunch of just stuff. I've got no capacity to do that. I have no capacity to go and see the need. Let me be transparent with you. October for Halloween, took the girls out trick-or-treating. There was a lady in my neighborhood who we met. At the time, she was sitting on her front porch. You could clearly see that she was older, had some mobility issues, things like that. And just talking with her, Cora goes up to get some candy, and my wife and I start talking to her. It turns out her husband passed away. She was there all alone. And she started crying. She started crying, talking about how lonely she was and how that was her husband's house that he had grown up in, just all these things. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, Kevin, you need to go check in on this lady. You've got to go check in on this lady. Guys, it's March 8th. You know how many times I've checked in on this lady? 0. Not for lack of good intent. Not for lack of wanting to. Life has a way of just getting busy. Guys, I know it. I see it. I'm living it. But at some point, we have to look at what we've piled on our plate and decide what good things that we're doing right now need to be postponed. What are the good things right now that I need to take off so that I can make time to do the work that Christ calls me to? that lady needed somebody. She cried. And I haven't once gone checked on that. We've grown calloused to the needs around us, guys. Because we have our own needs and we see our own problems. And it gets hard. We're reminded in this text today that we need compassionate eyes. The eyes of Jesus to see people as they are. The next need that we have, we need to be praying boldly. We need bold prayers. Prayer for the harvest. This is twofold. We should both be praying for the harvest itself, that the Lord would continue to ready those around us to receive the gospel, that their hearts are already being softened by the Spirit to receive Christ. And at the same time, as we are praying for those things in the harvest, we need to be praying that the Lord is raising up more to go out into the harvest. This is our prayer for Nashville. Proclamation Church, if you are here, if you call this church home, I'm going to be upfront and honest with you right now that this is our prayer for you and for everybody else in this city. That we want to see people who are in the city and on our corner come to faith in Jesus Christ through the testimony of Proclamation Church, and that those people who gather here, we want to see those people then brought into a community of faith where they can experience the body of Christ, and then we want to see those same people sit back out into the field because the harvest is still plentiful. Every week, that is my prayer. The harvest is still there. This is the paradox that exists, that there is never a shortage of the harvest. Even when we see people who were a part of the harvest, who have been saved and are sent back into the harvest, there is now not somehow less of a harvest. If anything, it continues to grow. The more and more people engaged in harvesting, the more and more vast we will see that the harvest actually is. Before the disciples were sent, they were first called to pray. Prayer aligns our hearts with God's mission, and when we begin praying for lost people, we will become more aware of them, our compassion will grow, and our willingness to act will increase. We need bold prayers. And final thing is, we need boldness for the work. As we see at the very end of the text, prayer is not where the calling begins and ends. We are called to pray, and then we are called to step into the work ourselves. You don't have to reach the whole world, fam, but you can reach the people that God has placed in your life. My challenge for each of you from today until Easter time, my challenge is that you will pray 3 things every single day. You ready? You may want to write this down. I'm not going to have a slide for them. Sorry. Here are the 3 things I want you to pray for every single day from now until Easter. Lord, today, give me an opportunity to witness. Lord, today, give me the wisdom to see it. And Lord, today, give me the boldness to take it. Give me the opportunity, give me the wisdom, and give me the boldness. When you leave out of here today, perhaps you might need to grab a few more inviter cards. Maybe set a goal for yourself today that every day until Easter, the Lord would bring somebody into your path. Pray every day that the Lord would bring somebody into your path that you could share one card with. You could talk to that person. Maybe it's a coworker, maybe it's a waiter or a waitress at a restaurant. Make sure you leave a good tip. Do not leave that card that says Proclamation's name on there. No, tip well. As you leave, grab a few cards and make that your prayer every morning. Lord, give me one person today in my path. One person that I can invite to Easter or a 5-year celebration. There are flyers out there. You can take a flyer and put it up in a workspace or a coffee shop. You can go stick them under people's windshields if you want to be that person. Go ahead. Annoy some people for the gospel. There are flyers out there and cards. Mr. Rogers told children to look for the helpers. Jesus does something more powerful in that he invites us, his followers, to become the helpers. The harvest is plentiful, And somewhere in your life right now, there is one person that God is placing in your path. The question that Jesus leaves us with is this: will we walk past them, or will you step into the harvest? I'm going to invite our prayer team to come down forward. Today, as you're here, if you've got somebody that's on your heart that you want to pray for, if you just want to come up here and pray, it doesn't have to be with anybody from the prayer team. If you just want to come up here and pray, or you have something that you have going on in your life that you do need prayer for, this team is here for you today. And this time now is for you, in this moment, to seek the Lord as we continue to worship.